Well, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has called last weekend's strike on Saudi oil installations an act of war by Iran. Pompeo's in Saudi Arabia for talks as officials there unveiled debris and satellite images they say prove Iran sponsored the attacks. Now, it caused disruption to about 5% of the global supply of crude oil. Although Iran continues to deny blame, Washington says it will impose what it's calling substantial sanctions on Tehran.
Remnants of drones and a cruise missile. The Saudi Defense Ministry claims they were among the weapons used in last weekend's strikes on two of its oil facilities. Maps drawn up to show that the attack most likely came from a northerly direction. Saudi military spokesman Colonel Turki al-Malki said the assault was sponsored by Iran and did not originate in Yemen in the south, the home of Houthi rebels who earlier claimed responsibility. But the colonel didn't explicitly accuse Tehran of launching the attack and admitted they didn't know where the weapons were fired from.
We are working to know exactly the launch point. Whoever launched the UAV or the cruise missile will take the accountability for attacking the Saudi infrastructure and the Saudi civilian.
Iran has renewed its denial of involvement in the attack.
The issue is completely clear, and these claims and accusations are firstly completely, seriously and decisively rejected.
Saudi Arabia's ally Washington is saying off the record it's convinced of Iran's involvement, but President Trump is avoiding direct accusations and being cautious when it comes to questions of U.S. military involvement.
We haven't learned much that we didn't know, but there is a certain a guarantee factor. We're really at a point now where we know very much what happened. You know, there's plenty of time to do some dastardly things. It's very easy to start, and we'll see what happens.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has arrived in Saudi Arabia. He's called the strikes on Saudi Arabia's oil infrastructure an act of war. Meeting with the Crown Prince, he said Washington wants to build a coalition of European and Arab partners to deter and confront threats.
Let's talk more about this now with Marika Transfeld, an international consultant for the Yemen Polling Center. That's an independent research center. Thanks very much for coming in, Marika. Mike Pompeo has called the attack on Saudi facilities an act of war. Very strong language there. How certain is it that Iran, as Washington claims, is behind this attack?
Well, of course, Iran is denying any responsibility. But on that backdrop, it's important to note that generally in the region, we've been seeing an escalation of these kinds of attacks. And it all points to Iran, if not directly, then to its proxies. So that means that Iran is working with proxies in Iraq, but also in Yemen, in Lebanon. And through these proxies, Iran is able to do these kinds of attacks. So even if Iran is not responsible directly, then it is by supplying weapons or by giving intelligence that make these kinds of attacks possible.
Okay, the supplying of intelligence being very important. So are you saying that that would explain why Yemen's Houthis claimed responsibility for this?
Exactly. So the Houthis have a very close relationship with Iran. It's not clear what the nature of this relationship is, if Iran can simply give orders to the Houthis that they will then implement. But at the moment, the Houthis are interested in displaying themselves as being very capable of performing such attacks. They are consolidating their control in northern Yemen, and this is really part of, demonstrating that they are a force to be reckoned with. But just because they claimed the attack doesn't mean they actually did the attack.
They actually could have come from Iran then, conceivably. It is a possibility.
Well, the Saudis are saying the attacks came from the north. So if that is the case, then they could have been launched anywhere from Iraq to parts of Iran. But again, there's no certainty about where the attacks were actually launched from.
We've heard Mike Pompeo call this an act of war. The U.S. President Donald Trump has said, we'll see what happens. Could we expect an American military strike, or will it stay with sanctions? What do you see happening?
I don't expect the Americans to use military force at the moment. I think that none of the actors involved can really afford to start a war on this issue. I do think sanctions are realistic, but that is going to provoke a reaction from Iran.
Briefly, if you could, this is being called a low-level attack using the drones. Is that the case, or is it in fact more sophisticated?
The drones themselves may be low level, but I do believe that these kinds of attacks require a lot of intelligence that many of the proxies of Iran do not have, which again shows that Iran might have supplied some intelligence to make this possible.
Marika Transfield, thanks so much for coming in from the Yemen Polling Center.